Actual versus formal parameters. Formal parameters are the names of the variables written inside function definition. These act as a placeholder for the actual values which are supplied during the function call statement. On the other hand, actual parameters, also called as actual arguments, are the real values on which functions operate. These are supplied during function call statement. Let us understand formal and actual parameters through an example where I will be adding two integer variables using a function and return an integer value as the sum. So in order to do it, I will have to type here hash include iostream, which is the name of the header file, then using namespace standard, and after that here I will type the declaration of the function. Let's call my function as add because basically I'm adding two integers. So let's call this function as add, and if I'm adding two integers and the sum will also be an integer, that means return type of my function will be int. And here inside the parenthesis I will pass both of my integer variables which I'm going to add inside the function. So my first variable, let's call it as num1, and second variable will be num2. Both are of integer type. So here I will have to type the data type of my first variable, which is int. After that I will type num1, which is my first variable, integer type variable, and similarly I will type here second variable, and after that I will type a semicolon. So this declaration part is over. Now before I proceed, let me tell you that first of all, when we are mentioning the formal parameters, at that time we usually don't provide any value, and if you are providing some value, that is a default value. So I will tell you about default values later on, but right now just understand that we have to specify the name as well as data type of formal parameters individually and separate all these parameters using a comma operator, as you can see over here. Now let's move on to the main function. So I will declare my main function as int main, and now I will type here curly braces. I will write the function body later on. Let's go downwards, and here I will type the definition of my add function. So again I have to type the same header, which is int add, and here int num1 comma int num2, but instead of a semicolon I will go ahead with a pair of curly braces. Now I want to add num1 and num2 and store their result in some third variable. So let us first of all create the third variable. Let's call it as sum, and it will also be of integer type because sum is equal to num1 plus num2, and num1 and num2 are both of integer type, so sum is also integer type. And here I will simply return sum. So here please note down that I have written the return statement because the data type, the return type of my function is int. So here I have to return some integer value. If the return type, let's suppose if it was void, then in that case I could have printed the sum value inside the function only, and there was no need for return statement in that case. Anyway, so my function definition is now over. Now let's call this function inside the main function. So let's say add, and here semicolon and return. So what we have done till now, we have declared a function whose name is add, return type is int, and it includes two formal parameters which are num1 and num2, both are of integer type. And then we define this function. Here the same function header has been used, and inside the function I have included a third variable which will store the sum of num1 and num2, and then I return this sum as the value calculated by the function. Now inside the main function I have called this function. Now suppose if I execute this program here, till now I haven't provided any values. As you can see, it is saying too few arguments to function int add. I cannot call my function just like this. I must provide here some values, and those will be real integer values. So let's say I call my function with values here, suppose 5 and 4. So the sum of 5 and 4 will be 9, and even though this value will be returned here, I will not be able to see it. Let's execute and you will understand what I am saying. So when I am executing this function, so note down, no value has been returned. That's because I'm not printing it. I'm just returning it. I'm not displaying the value. So here, if I put here cout and output operator and now execute the function, then the sum is equal to 9. So let's make it more cleaner. So let me type here /n sum of two integers is equal to, and then I will call the function, and let's compile and run again. So here sum of two integers is equal to 9. Alright, this is about the basics of actual and formal parameters. By the way, these 5 and 4 are actual parameters here, and actual parameters are those which are used inside the function call statement. These are the real values on which the function operate, and formal parameters are those which are mentioned inside the function header during function declaration and definition. And after this, I want to tell you one more thing about the default arguments. So let us suppose here for num2 variable I use a default value, let's say 10. So num2 has a default value of 10. Now if I call my function with only one parameter, that means I am providing the value for num1 only, not for num2, and in that case my compiler will use the default value of num2, which is equal in that case my compiler will use the default value of num2 which is equal to 10. So here let's execute, compile and run, and as you can see, the sum of two integers is 15, which is 5 plus 10. So 5 is the value of num1 and which I provided during the call statement, and 10 is the value which I provided as the default value. Okay, last thing is that if I am using the default parameters, then I must start from the right hand side. I mean, if I put here, let's suppose num1 equal to 10 and I do not provide a value for num2, this is not allowed in C++. I must provide the value starting from the right hand side and then I can move towards the left hand side. So if I now execute it, so it is saying default argument missing for parameter 2. So I must either provide my default value for both the variables or only for the right hand side variable, not for the left hand side, or the first parameter default value is not allowed. So let's put one more value here, let's say num2, and let's say I am putting here num2 equal to 90, and here if I call my add function without any parameters, now it will work fine. So sum of two integers is 100, where 10 is the value of num1 and 90 is the value of num2, and the calculated value is 100.